Good evening, I'm Tim McGonigal.
And I'm Shannon Newth. Montana's primary elections are on June 5th. In just over a week, absentee ballots will be sent out to voters.
The primaries feature a number of important races, including the contest for Cascade County Sheriff. On the Democratic side, incumbent Sheriff Bob Edwards faces two challengers: Great Falls Police Detective Jesse Slaughter and George Kynette.
They're seeking to square off against the Republican candidate, Cascade County Deputy Bob Rosapal, in November. Tonight, we're pleased to have all of the men with us at stake in the Sheriff's Office race on hand for a Sheriff's Candidate Forum.
Now, even though Mr. Rosapal is unopposed in the Republican primary, we have included him this evening in the name of equal time and for the benefit of viewers who may be undecided. Most of the questions for tonight's forum have been selected by a panel of KRTV newsroom employees, but we've also solicited questions from viewers, and for more on that, we'd like to introduce the third member of our on-air team tonight, Montana This Morning anchor Keely Van Middendorp.
That's right. Over the next hour, I'll be taking your questions by email, Facebook, and Twitter. Simply send your questions to the candidates electronically, and we may use it during tonight's debate.
Now, we've selected the order for answering questions by a drawing with the candidates. Each candidate who is asked a question will have 1 minute to respond. The other candidates will have 30 seconds to respond. We will also give each candidate 90 seconds to deliver a closing statement at the end of the forum. And tonight's forum is being streamed live on KRTV.com. Afterwards, it will be available there along with our YouTube channel. We hope you enjoy tonight's discussion.
Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the KRTV Cascade County Sheriff Debate.
And welcome back once again. We can now see our candidates on the news desk there. We have from left to right Detective Jesse Slaughter with the Great Falls Police Department, current Sheriff Bob Edwards of Cascade County. We have Deputy Bob Rosapal with the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, and Mr. George Kynette. Gentlemen, thank you for taking time tonight.
Now, we drew those numbers as we mentioned, and Detective Slaughter will be going first tonight. So let's get right into those questions. You'll be up first, and again, proceed to your right to answering questions to the viewers' right. All right, first up tonight, do you believe that Cascade County has a drug problem? And if so, how do you plan to combat the problem?
Yes, absolutely. Cascade County has a drug problem, and it's something, a trend that's happening all over the country, and obviously it's being affected here in Cascade County at a rapid rate. I have a lot of experience with this problem, mostly probably with the opioid epidemic that we're seeing. It was pain pills for a while, that was the big thing, and now we're moving into heroin. You know, and that's becoming the big thing right now that's really putting a big strain on our community. It's extremely dangerous, and then now with fentanyl, it's going to a whole nother level of officer safety. Some of the things that I plan to do is we have to work with HIDA. We have to support HIDA. We have to do the good enforcement. We also have to go out there and we have to help as much as we can with prevention programs, drug treatment courts, things like that. Some of the other ideas I have looking forward is we need to look progressive at maybe getting a drug canine dog to help detect more drugs and, you know, to help with that problem as we move forward.
All right, thank you. Sheriff Edwards.
Yes, we do have a drug problem in Cascade County. It's glaringly obvious. The jail's full because of these issues. My plan is the supply and demand issue here in Great Falls, especially for meth, or I should say Cascade County or the state, the supply and demand. It's very easy to get. We have to cut the demand, and we have to pretty much cut the head off the snake, if you will, the suppliers. And we've traced all this meth to another country. So we need to partner up like we have been doing. Our drug task force does a fantastic job, but we need to continue to partner with our federal brothers so that we can stop it at the source. We got to end the demand, and then we got to, and then cut off the head of the snake that's supplying it.
All right.
I do agree. We do have a drug problem here in Cascade County. One of the things I would like to see is more deputies added into the drug task force. That's going to help eliminate some of this. All the cases that they have, bring it down a little bit. And again, we've had great answers here. You know, K9, that would be awesome as well.
Mr.
Yes,
Kynette.
I believe there is a drug problem. I've seen it. I've got to participate in the drug treatment courts. I now work over at the pre-release because I did follow the drug, see where they'd end up. it's there. Now the big thing is spice we're seeing, where this synthetic marijuana you can buy here in town. They smoke it, and it causes you to bleed on the inside. You know, these synthetic drugs are terrible. We got to do something. I don't know what to do, but we got to do something.
Okay. Our next question is for you, Sheriff Edwards. And Sheriff, over this last year, your name has been in the news for a PFMA charge in Helena and the revocation of your law enforcement certificates by post. So with that in mind, why should the citizens of Cascade County bring you back for another term?
Excellent question, and I'm glad it was brought up. I've dedicated about roughly 30 years of my life, not only serving in the United States Army, but 26 years total with the Cascade County Sheriff's Office. People aren't really looking at all the good I've done or throughout my career. I had one bad hour. Those charges are dropped. That is done. That is ended. I can't talk about post a lot since there's some pending litigation, if you will. I have requested a hearing, and in the next few days the media will be getting more information on that I will be releasing. So I asked to be sanctioned. That's no secret. I just believe that post needs to be fair and consistent, and with the information that will eventually come out, the people will see that it was not fair and or consistent with other situations similar to mine.
Okay. Deputy Rosapal, your response.
Yeah, our sheriff approves policy, and when we have policy and he expects our deputies to uphold that policy, I believe the sheriff should have to also hold up to that, and if not, he's to be held accountable for his actions.
Thank you, Deputy Rosapal. Mr. Kynette.
You know, all the years I've worked with Bob, I've never seen that type of behavior in Bob before. I was kind of disappointed to hear about it, but I realize everybody kind of makes mistakes. Like, one of us could be sitting up on the bench here the next day or tonight, so that's all I really have to say about that.
All right, thank you. And Detective Slaughter?
Yeah, you know, this is an interesting situation. You know, I deal with this every day. In court, to testify, I have to maintain the highest levels of integrity, or I can't testify anymore, and then I can no longer protect children in our community. And the simple fact is certain mistakes that you make, and when you lose your integrity, you can't get it back. It's a one-way ticket. And we're all under that microscope, and under the current climate in the United States right now, people don't have a lot of sympathy for us when it comes to these types of issues. And I think that's really important. And having served on the Post Council as a member prior to this, I can say that their handling of this was absolutely consistent.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We move on now to discuss child abuse. Cascade County has a very high rate of child abuse. That's been an issue for quite a while, not only child abuse, but also neglect. What would you as sheriff do to help combat that, or what would the role of sheriff be in helping to combat child abuse and neglect in our county? We'll start with you, Deputy Rosapal.
It is very high. I'm part of the Cascade Board of Directors, and we're seeing a lot of kids, an amazing amount, over 400 kids, new cases that are going into court right now. Education, prevention, it's hard to decide on how we're going to go about doing these prevention programs. Again, the education for the parents on the cultures. Anyway, what we need is more volunteers out there as well to help with the court cases that we have. But preventing, the sheriff's role is we just got to keep arresting and making sure that these people get the help that they need through different programs, et cetera, through the courts.
Thank you. Mr. Kynette, your response.
Child abuse, it is rampant. Going into the courts when I was transport, there was always somebody in there with child abuse, neglect type things. I think somehow we need to get the root out of the cause, and it's the drugs. That's what's causing it. We just need to somehow put a stop to it. So get in there and find out what the root is and put a stop to it. Somehow help them.
Thank you. Detective Slaughter.
As most people know, I work child abuse every day, and that's what I've done for the past 6 years of my career that I've dedicated my career to. This is something that's very close to my heart, and it's a very difficult thing to combat because it comes at you from so many different angles. But one thing we have to do a better job of is educating the public about the abuse. Oftentimes when we poll jurors after trials, some of the false stigmas and things of victim blaming and things like that we learn are really prevalent. And those are some of the things that we have to help educate, and so the public is more informed when it comes to these cases.
Thank you. And Sheriff Edwards.
Obviously, we have an issue, and our numbers are extremely high in Cascade County. I believe it's 541 new cases have entered the court system this year alone, which is, in my opinion, outrageous. If you really sit down and take a look at this, a lot of this has to do with addictive behavior of parents, in my opinion. Once again, it goes back to that drug issue. We have to stop the supply and demand in our county. And I have a feeling why the numbers are so high here is because we've all done a good job of educating, and we encourage people to report these types of crimes now. You know, to say that we're higher than Billings, that just blows my mind, but I think it's because we have educated citizens that are willing, sorry about that at the time, but willing to report these types of crimes as well.
All right. Next question. What can be done to improve service to the most rural areas of Cascade County? Mr. Kynette.
Usually it's done by volunteers. I call them the county gold, the volunteers. They are the volunteer firemen. They're the QRU, the quick response units, the Meals on Wheels. Any volunteers you can help in the rural service, rural area is great, you know, because you're going to have the expanding population now. The baby boomers are getting older, and you're going to need these services out in the county. So we're going to need more volunteer, more services.
Okay. Detective Slaughter?
My plan is, first and foremost, I want to bring back the resident deputies. I want to get resident deputies out in our communities, deputies that live in the rural communities. Their families live there, they live there. They become the community deputy for community policing for that community. One of the other things I want to look at real hard is getting more reserve deputies. The Cascade County Sheriff's Office is down to 2 reserve deputies. I want to build that back up and get them working in the schools to get more school safety to those rural schools. Those rural schools are way out there by themselves. They're isolated, and I want to make sure we don't have a tragedy in our community.
Sheriff Edwards?
Rural services, we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. In 1985, we had 46 deputy sheriffs. Currently, we have 36 and 3 times the caseload. So we're doing the absolute best we can with what we have. My undersheriff and I are currently in communication with the Cascade County Commission, and we've got a plan in place to add more deputies. That is, the bottom line is we need deputy sheriffs first. And the bottom line there is we need to find sustainable money for this. Reserve program, fabulous. I was a product of it. I love it. I back it. It is not gone contrary to popular belief. So that is still on the table, but we are going to solve that problem, and I hope to have a positive answer for you all here in the next upcoming weeks.
Okay. And Detective Rosapal?
I agree that we do need more deputy sheriffs. I have a plan as well, if this doesn't go through, with getting more deputies on the streets. Reserve program is an awesome thing. I was a product of the reserve deputies as well. However, we're out there training right now the rural schools with the ALICE program. That's the alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. So we're given the tools out there for the rural schools. We cannot use the reserve deputies inside the schools. They have to be supervised. And direct supervision means that they have to be with a deputy. They cannot be out there by themselves. And that's according to law.
All right. We now turn, as we mentioned before, to asking you, the viewers, questions. And for that, Keely Van Mittendorp now joins us. Keely?
You're right, Shannon. Let's move on to a question from a viewer. Kelsey would like to know, what kind of de-escalation training would you bring in to make officers well equipped to deal with suicide, domestic abuse, mental health crises, and other issues?
Yeah, I'll take this. But first of all, I want to address what Bob Rosapal talked about with reserve deputies. That is completely false. They are not illegal. They do not have to be directly supervised. That is a case that comes directly out of Missoula County, and I believe it's Clooney versus the Missoula County. And that's an isolated incident in which that occurred. And if you read up on that, what you'll find out is that is basically during the lawsuit in that case, they told Missoula County that they had to have direct supervision over those. I did the research. Even Lewis and Clark County that borders us, they run reserve deputies alone as well. So that part I just want to address as not true. Now, as far as regards to de-escalation training, there's tons of things out there as far as that goes. I can't remember the name of the technique right now off the top of my head, but you want to offer your deputies different training when it comes to de-escalation. You want to promote that, and part of it has to do with their presence, how they appear, what they look like, and that they maintain a professional look and appearance to them.
It's your turn for the response to our social media question.
If I understood it correctly, we have a tool in place called crisis intervention training. And I'm proud to say that I have helped bring that back to Cascade County. I was instrumental in that. And that's the training where deputy sheriffs and all law enforcement are trained to recognize those in crisis, those that are potentially suicidal, and it gives us the tools on how to de-escalate somebody in crisis, and it's an alternative to going to jail. So we're able to recognize those red flags, and we're able to get those folks to a hospital or get them the help, and it's a very popular, successful program.
Deputy Rosapal.
I'm going to rebut to him really quick, Mr. Slaughter, that it is in Montana Code annotated, and I will show you after this. Right now, I am a CIT coordinator for the state of Montana. I've run the CIT classes here in Great Falls, as well as assisted throughout the state of Montana. I sit on the crisis steering committee with the mental health, and we've also, through that committee, developed the crisis response team. So with that being said, we do go out and we help, it helps the officers who are on the street, who are being called to people with mental health issues, to give them an alternative place to go rather than criminalizing the people with mental health.
All right, Mr. Kynette.
I agree. After I've ran for the last 20 years people to Warm Springs, and with these new designer drugs hitting the market, it's hard to tell in this bizarre behavior who has an addiction and who is mental health. So I agree on this training. We need to figure it out quick, and whether they go to jail or whether they go to mental health facility.
All right. Next question, we'll start again with Sheriff Edwards. And Sheriff, how can you work to build upon public trust in the Sheriff's office and build stronger community relations?
Well, first and foremost, public trust you have to have. Any agency, any law enforcement agency that doesn't have the trust of their community or the public will fail. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. On that note, I kind of figured this was coming up. Before I made my decision to run for re-election, I did two things. I talked to my family, which is most important to me, and then I surveyed the citizens. I wanted to make sure that that public trust was still there. I knew it was there for the Sheriff's office, but I wanted to make sure it was there on my behalf as well. And I have received overwhelming support from the citizens of this county, cards, letters, emails, phone calls, encouraging me to run because they trust what I do. They say I've done a good job, and I'm going to stand by that. Public relations. We have to educate the public on what we do. A Sheriff's Citizens Academy has been on my desk for years. That's one way we can build those relations. When you bring the citizens to us, or when we bring them into us and we educate them on everything we do, the relationship goes up. We don't have, oh, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm sorry, I'm cutting the time there.
Okay. Detective Rosapal.
I believe that we do have trust. The deputies with the Sheriff's office, the citizens do trust us. As far as building the relations, I want to form a citizens or a community committee, which brings those people in once a month, quarterly, and we sit down and we go over what we've been doing, what issues they have in their areas, having that, and when you open up that communication, it really develops the relationship with the community.
Okay. Mr. Kynette?
Public trust, I kind of look at that as public safety too, making sure we have the services available like rural fire, the quick response medical teams, whatever services we need. Relations, you got to keep the positive relations going, because once you lose them, it's very hard to get back again. And like I've heard before, the meetings, get with the people, build that trust.
Okay. And Detective Slaughter?
I believe that the deputies do have public trust. I do believe that. I believe that the leadership of the Cascade County Sheriff's Office does not have a public trust. And I think that they've lost that, and that's why I'm in this race, is because it's time for something new. It's time for a fresh face. It's time for new ideas. I too want to have a Citizens Academy. I don't know why they haven't been able to get it up and running. It's not that difficult of a program. I ran it for several years in the Great Falls Police Department, and that's something that's very important. But also going out into the community and meeting the community on their terms, I think that's important too, and you have to be proactive with that.
All right, the next question, we'll start first with Deputy Rosapal. Do you believe that transparency with the public you serve is important? And if so, what does it look like to have transparency be part of your role as sheriff?
I absolutely believe in transparency. Again, as I'm talking about this Citizens or Community Committee, when you sit down and you discuss what issues they're having, you share your issues, and everybody can help solve each other's problems, we can better the transparency of our office. That also includes our employees that we have, sitting down, open communication with them as well. So transparency for both the community and our office staff is the utmost important.
Thank you. Mr. Kynette.
I think transparency is a must there. The taxpayers get to see where their money's going. You know, take them on the jail tours, take them out in the car, the ride-alongs, let them see what they're spending their money on. And that's part of the transparency as far as I'm concerned.
Detective Slaughter?
Yes, transparency is vital. It goes along with everything else we've talked about with public trust and all the topics that we've discussed so far. I think it's really important that we have a very transparent office. The Citizens Academy would be one way to do that. How you deal with the budgets and everything else would be another way to do that. And also with the staff, I want to have good labor management meetings with the staff, and we update the staff and we let them in on everything that we're doing, and make sure that we're giving not only the community the why, but giving the staff the why, because they're the ones that carry out the mission every day.
And Sheriff Edwards.
I stand by my record when it comes to transparency. I've opened my door to all my staff if they should have any questions or any concerns or want to know why we're doing something. I've also extended that invitation to the public, and the public has used that. Anything they want to know, I've been upfront and honest and transparent about anything, everything that goes on at the Sheriff's Office. I have to say something about Mr. Slaughter's comment about the leadership at the Sheriff's Office. It's kind of a bold statement when you've got two leaders from the office sitting there. Mr. Slaughter hasn't done his homework. He doesn't know anything about the Sheriff's Office and the leadership there. It's all speculation. I have a great office, and I have an office full of fantastic leaders, so I kind of take offense to that. I just thought I'd have to rebut that.
Okay. We're going to send it now again to Keely Van Middendorp, who has another viewer-submitted question.
That's right. This question comes from a viewer. Carrie would like to know how many hours each week, minimally, each candidate will put in as office time, and why. Mr. Kynette, we'll start with you.
When you first take this job like this, there is no set hours. It's 24/7. There's no 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. It is going to be, for the first year, probably 12, 15 hours a day trying to get everything set up, review the budgets, review the training, hiring records, and whatever else comes with this job.
All right, Detective Slaughter.
Yes, I would agree with that. You know, I currently, in my current job, I often work 60, 65-hour weeks as it is. So I'm prepared to take that on. You know, your first probably your first term in office, there's going to be no such thing as a 40-hour work week. You're going to work whenever you need. And by definition of the sheriff, you work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's a fact. We do work. As the sheriff, I am on 24/7. Over the years, I mean, there's really no Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's just when business can be done a lot of times. The phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't stop. The emails that continually come in. So there's really no set schedule, but you put in a lot of hours as the sheriff.
Well, basically, once I take over as a sheriff, going out to these town meetings, meeting with the fire departments, the EMS, getting my face out there into the communities and letting them know. So there's going to be a lot of hours put in.
All right, thank you. And a reminder, we do still have a few questions to ask from you, the viewers, throughout the remainder of our time. So if you do have a question, you can submit those by Facebook or send us an email. And Keely might be reading those to our candidates here in a little bit. All right, we'll begin again with Jesse. It's time to talk about the budget. What would your plans be to help the department be fiscally responsible?
Yeah, you got to be super. Fiscal responsibility is everything. First and foremost, I have experience with budgets. I will say I don't have an experience with a $15 million budget. I'll be the first to admit that. However, budgets are just, a $15 million budget, just more zeros. And you got to take care of that budget, and you got to be responsible with it. Obviously, your biggest thing you're going to have to monitor with a budget is personnel costs. Personnel costs are always going to be your biggest cost. Then balanced with the jail, which is a unique, the jail creates unique challenges for the budget because there's money going in and money going out, where a lot of other public safety entities don't have that. It's just a set budget, and that's what you get. So it does create a lot of challenge. So I would work really hard with the budget to zero out the budget, to get the most out of it for the taxpayers, I'm sorry, so that they get the most service for what they have in their budget, but you always have to make sure you maintain a balanced budget every year.
Sheriff Edwards.
I have the experience with the $15 million budget, and it's a lot more than just a bunch of extra zeros tacked on to 15. When I took over, we were $1.2 million. We had a $1.2 million deficit, and we currently are sitting at a $3.5 million surplus. There's a lot more to this that my opponent doesn't understand. Out of that $15 million budget, I have to make roughly over $9 million even just to make budget. And when I became sheriff, I put a team together, and we've accomplished that goal. And this is the first time in the history of the sheriff's office that this budget has been this sound. So it's a lot more than just extra zeros on a 15.
Deputy Rose Powell.
First off, our budget is $14.4 million for this year, this fiscal year, and $5.4 million of that comes out of our Cascade local taxes. $9 million of that is made through the jail, through contracts, and that's for basically inmates. $3.8 million of that is the state contract, so you got about $5.2 million, which is either feds or whatever. If we lose that contract, imagine what the expense would be, $5.2 million for our taxpayers. So we cannot lose that.
And Mr. Canet.
I've worked in the private sector at the Ryan's Warehouse for almost 20 years as a supervisor, and it was always had a budget in any department I worked in. It's basically your allowance. What you do is then would sit down with the county commissioners every month, review what you've been spending, and they would put their input in, and then at the end of the year, you should have no problem making your budgets or being a little off or a little over, just a little bit.
Okay. Next question, we'll start with Sheriff Edwards. And Sheriff, what is the most difficult situation you've had to deal with as a law enforcement professional? How did you handle it, and how did it make you better at your job?
Oh, the most difficult situation. I was hoping that this wouldn't come up, but as the sheriff, when you lose a deputy in the line of work, line of duty is extremely difficult, and I don't want to make this political on there, and it's probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm not even going to go any further.
Deputy Rosapal?
A lot of the most difficult things that we do is, as a coroner, our office is both sheriff and coroner. So dealing with families, it's very difficult. And it's not just one case, it could be many cases, dealing with deaths of children, loved ones, etc. So a lot of those experience, when you sit down and you actually show emotion with the family, those are the tough ones.
Mr. Kynette?
The most difficult experience I've had was probably basically repossessing kids or taking them out of the family into a foster home or something like that. I really didn't like doing that, but we had to do it, and that's probably the most difficult thing I've had to do.
Okay. Detective Slaughter?
I've been in several difficult situations throughout my career. I've been involved in officer-involved shooting. I've been involved in several other close calls, but hands down, the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with in my career would be the child homicides. That's something that you can't get out of your head, and you can't figure out why. There's no real reason why. And the follow-up work, and sometimes often years of work that you have to do to try to make a case on that, when not only that this tragedy of this young person was taken from this world, but that they don't have a voice anymore, and that you're their sole voice. So I've learned a lot about, you know, controlling my emotions and dealing with that so you can carry on professionally.
All right, we want to check in again with Keely and to hear from some of our viewers. Keely.
All right, thanks, Shannon. This is from a viewer. Shannon wants to know, there have been a number of suicides in the jail. What mental health programs do you plan to implement to ensure the safety of inmates? Detective Rosapal, if you would start.
We have had a lot of suicides in our jail over the past several years. We do have mental health workers inside the jail right now. The screening process maybe could be a little bit better. Also training the entire detention staff at the CIT, the Crisis Intervention Training, and making use of that program.
I agree. More advanced training in that area of the suicide prevention, because you really don't know if somebody's going to commit suicide. There's no warning most of the time. They just go ahead and do it. But if we have the advanced training, especially now with these new drugs, we don't know what they're going to do. So we need the training.
Yeah, I would agree that training obviously is a very important key. We need to train the detention officers and help them. One of the other things I think we need to look hard at is partnering even more with the community and working on one of the issues you run into in a jail is after 30 days, the sheriff's office takes on the bill for their medications. And we need to find creative ways to mitigate that as much as possible so that there aren't inmates inside the jail that aren't getting the medication they need. They're not being weaned off of it while they're doing time in jail, so they are safer in the facility and in the community later.
It is a fact, and holding with transparency, obviously we've had suicides in the jail. We have an excellent screening tool, and unfortunately, a lot of times these folks, when they're determined, they're fairly good actors, and it seems to be what's going on. Our officers are trained, and I agree that the CIT program needs to continue. It only needs to get better, and I'm a proponent of that, and we can make that happen. That's easy.
And so the next question goes to Mr. Kynette. How important is new technology to law enforcement, whether it be body cameras or budget management software?
I think new technology, it will help the either the out in the field or in the department there. You know, a new technology, like you have this drowning victim out there now. People, when we were in search and rescue or the office, we'd walk along the banks, and you've got the raging river, and somebody could fall in. A drone would be good at this point to fly around the river and spot this instead of somebody walking in this area. A lost person up in the mountains, send the drones out and see if they can spot them.
Okay. Detective Slaughter?
As an Internet Crimes Against Children detective, I deal with technology every day. I understand its importance, and there's a lot of technology out there right now. In our ever-changing world of everything becoming digital, whether it be the phones or the computers or everything, watches now are digital. There's, you know, cell brights, different forensic software that we need to be up to date on, and it's really expensive. And we need to be looking forward for grants and partnerships with other agencies that may already have this stuff, because it's extremely expensive. But at the end of the day, the only way we're going to be able to solve cases and protect the public is we have to have really good technology to do that. Sheriff Edwards?
I embrace technology. You get a few of the older guys grumbling a little bit because they're used to the pen and paper type thing. And I'm glad you mentioned partnership. We have partnered with, like, the Great Falls Police Department, technology for the Faro crime scene. It documents everything there. It's a wonderful thing. Our latest and greatest software update that we just did, we partnered with the Great Falls Police Department. So we have information sharing. Everything from our in-car cameras to our body cameras, it's amazing, and I embrace it, and I only want to take it into the future. It saves time for deputies, so they can do other things, and we will continue to look at other advancements when I continue to be your sheriff.
Deputy Rosapal?
I agree. They have all made great statements on that. Technology is always changing. So I agree with the partnership. I mean, technology is expensive, so I agree with them.
Okay, this next question will begin with Detective Slaughter. How can we help to reduce recidivism rates, or the number of offenders who reoffend and go back into the jail? And what do you think is the Sheriff's Office's role in helping inmates integrate back into society?
Great question. I think, for starters, we need to make sure that we are actively involved in programs such as the 24/7 program, drug and veteran courts. These are really good programs where not only can we help people maybe coming out, but also stop people from going in. We have to come up with more creative solutions. We saw in the last legislation session that locking up people is not the way of the future anymore. The way of the future is community corrections. I have several family members involved in community corrections, and I'm very aware of how important this issue is. I think the future is going to be a pretrial probation program that's in other counties already. Missoula County, Yellowstone County, and I believe Gallatin County has pretrial services, and that's going to be the future. Is how do we monitor these people in our community safely, maintain public safety and public trust, hold people accountable, but yet find alternatives to incarceration.
Sheriff Edwards.
We do have a problem when it comes to recidivism, and I'm all for preventing that. We started a reentry program in 2012 for state inmates. So when they got out, they had a chance. They had an ID card. They had a job prospect. We worked very hard on that, and due to funding, that went away. Unfortunately, funding seems to be the bottom line there. One of the things I've seen over my 26 years is a lot of this crime that we're seeing is generational. We have to break that generational cycle. We have to get the kids, and I've partnered with many groups to get our children on the right track, which actually works. So that's one big part, and I'm going to still continue to assist those programs and put my badge behind that.
Deputy Rosapal.
It does start with training with the kids, educating them, educating the inmates. We can't stop them when they come out and they decide that they're going to reoffend. Drugs is our big issue. Property crimes, sex crimes, a lot of the crimes that we have in Cascade County are due to the drugs. And if we can get rid of that, then we should have less repeat offenders.
And your response, Mr. Kynette?
What I've seen to help reduce that recidivism rate is to have a good support system in place, working in the drug treatment courts and watching those work, and their pre-release. That's a very good support system. Most of them graduate going through, some of them don't. Some of them have to go back through again, but it's a good support system to help them to keep from going back to the addiction.
We're going to send it back now to Keely Van Middendorp, who has another online submitted question.
Thanks, Tim. That's right. Adrian would like to know, what are your plans, if elected, for aiding deputies and corrections officers with mental and emotional support after a traumatic event? Sheriff Edwards, we'll start with you.
My turn. I'm currently in, I feel it's very important. This is a topic that's near and dear to me, being real close to that. I'm in contact with a forensic psychologist right now, and we're working on a plan to actually have him in-house. The guy is amazing. Anyway, that's another story. But we have to have our critical incident debrief teams in place. We have to start taking care of our deputies and our detention and their mental health. And a lot of people don't know that one officer a day kills themselves in the United States. That is above and beyond the line of duty deaths for a year. And it is my goal not only to help those officers, but to incorporate their families. The families have nowhere to go. You have an officer that is in crisis themselves. Where does the spouse get to go? Where do the children get to go? And I'm actually working on a plan right now for that, and that will happen when I hold my seat for the next 4 years.
We have the employee assistance program that can assist our employees with getting some help. We also have a chaplaincy program that they're on call 24 hours a day. They'll come out, they'll do whatever needs to be done, help the employees. And they don't have to do it in a religious setting, but they're counselors and they can help them out.
Working in the jail is a very stressful situation, and you're going to see these kinds of tragedies or whatever on a daily basis. So yes, I think you need some counseling available to these people and the deputies 24/7.
So the employee assistance program is kind of where it all starts. We have to have a program that deputies can feel safe and detention officers can feel safe to go to a counselor where it's confidential and their employer is not going to know about what they talk about. They have to feel safe to be able to talk about these things. A robust post-traumatic stress program, a peer-to-peer program where peers help peers with these issues. Break down the stigmas. There's some mental health stigmas with law enforcement that scare them, and it makes them feel like the worst thing you can do to a cop is say, well, you're going to take your badge and your gun. Those are scary things. So we have to break down some of those stigmas, that those things, when they may or may not happen. And then as a long-term plan for worst case scenarios, look at a program like Battle Bro in Vermont, where it's an inpatient program where those suffering from horrible post-traumatic stress from the events of their work, they have that place to go.
All right, gentlemen, your next question will begin with Deputy Rosapal. What are your plans to improve recruitment and retainment of deputies and personnel?
Well, on our last deputy hiring, we did a lot of media, social media, banners, word of mouth for both deputies and detention staff. We were able to get about 65 applicants for our patrol, which is amazing because we usually get about 30 applicants. And it was we hired 7 people out of that last hiring process. But I think that how to retain them is you have to have a good culture and you have to have a good climate for the employees to work in. So we need to, the supervisors and the administration needs to be able to boost the morale, boost the trust, and to take care of their employees. How do we do that? Acknowledging them, that they are doing a good job, open communication with them, and giving them ownership in the office with either decisions or with projects that we have.
Your thoughts, Mr. Kynette?
We have a shrinking job force out there because the baby boomers are retiring, and I've ran into this situation before in the private sector where I worked. How to retain that individual. Most often I would bring them in, sit them down and do a training plan with them for 12 weeks and visit with them every 2 weeks, see how they're doing, and then again go for another 12 weeks to make them get that sense of belonging to stick around.
Detective Slaughter.
With the current generation, one of the things that we're failing to do in law enforcement is we have these recruitment videos with SWAT teams and canines and all this stuff, and what's happening is the new generation comes in and they're like, when do I get to do that? Well, you don't get to do that for 10 years. And it makes it really hard to retain them. So I think first we have to set realistic goals and expectations for them. Separate social media accounts, not running your recruiting on your department social media accounts. Making sure that all the deputies are recruiting officers and that they're out there recruiting people and that they carry the information for the people in the community who are interested, so they have like a one-stop shop right there.
And Sheriff Edwards.
Retainment, I need to touch on that. The boost of trust, make it comfortable. My opponent here is part of my administration and is responsible for that, being in charge of the training division and setting that up. That being stated, you've done a great job recruiting those for the jail and for the street. A lot of people leave us because there's no manpower. They're tired. They're going to go to an agency right now that has more manpower, and that's one of the goals. Once I get manpower, I think we'll have people stay. It's not about the money right now. It's my deputies are tired, so we're going to work on fixing that as well.
Thank you.
Our next question, we'll start with Mr. Kynette. What do you appreciate about the current sheriff and the current administration and what they've done for the sheriff's office?
Basically, I look in the paper and I don't see where we're having these rash of burglaries or having these problems. We're not having many hangings up in the jail. So it's kind of nice to see that right now, that something is being done in a positive way up there.
Okay. Detective Slaughter?
One of the things that impresses me a lot about the sheriff's office right now is they have some amazing people. In the midst of all the challenges that Sheriff Edwards just talked about with Manning and everything like that, the character of the men and women who are deputies and detention officer is outstanding. Great professionalism. They do a great job. On top of that, I think that the technology has come a long way. They're driving better vehicles and they seem to be better equipped.
Sheriff Edwards?
Oh, is this where I get a... No.
Here's your chance.
Actually, we have great leadership at the sheriff's office, and that reflects on all the staff, the deputies, the detention staff, and I'm going to say it now, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We have the best sheriff's office in the state of Montana. I can't say enough about it. We have a good, solid sheriff's office that serves the citizens and takes care of their needs, and that's because of our leadership at the sheriff's office.
Okay. And Deputy Roosevelt?
I think one of the positive things is that we do teamwork up there at the office, from the command staff down, allowed to get the budgets together, work together as a team to do that, to make sure that the office is running well and to be out there with the community. So I think the team as a whole has made the office look great.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to do one more question, but for this last one, you will each have 30 seconds. Detective Slaughter, will start with you, but as a reminder, it will be 30 seconds this time for your response rather than a minute to make it equal for all of you on this last question. What do you plan to do to help improve relationships with other law enforcement agencies in the state?
That's actually one of the things that is going to be my biggest strength, is I already have those relationships. I'm going to work really hard at making them better, coming up with events that we can collaborate on, more operations we can collaborate on, and work hard with other agencies and not be afraid to give them the credit, not be afraid to give our partners the credit where credit is due. This is as the sheriff already said, it's a low-manned agency, and if we don't work together in this community and basically come together and do work, we're not going to maximize our ability.
Thank you. Sheriff Edwards.
We have an outstanding relationship with throughout the state of Montana. with every law enforcement agency, especially our surrounding counties. Our track record is flawless. When they call us, we go, we help. If I call them, they come and help us, to the point of where they've asked for our policies and procedures, and we have actually given them those. There is no issue whatsoever, and I'm very proud of that, because we at this sheriff's office look at all of us in Montana and law enforcement as one big family, and we take care of each other.
Deputy Rosapal.
I have developed awesome relationships with our neighboring counties as well as other counties throughout the state, through the coroner, educating all the new deputy coroners throughout the state, the SWAT Standard Committee, and not only with those, but just the personal relationships, the training, going up into their agencies, having them come down here and training with them and making all of us better. So we have got great working relationships with other agencies.
Mr. Kynette.
I agree. You have to have positive, good working relations with the other law enforcement agencies in order to protect the community and get additional training for them. They're just another good resource to go to when you need somebody.
You gentlemen are also concise and to the point with your responses. We have time for another question. You'd also make excellent reporters, by the way, because of that quality. But we have time for one more question, and again, we'll give you each 30 seconds to respond for this one. We'll start with Sheriff Edwards. And what are the greatest needs of the Cascade County Sheriff's Office?
The greatest needs, as we speak today, is manpower. I sound like a broken record. We need the manpower. That's simply put. We're down a minimum of 10 since the 80s with triple the call load. We need the manpower. We need manpower in the jail. We could probably use another 10 to 12 detention officers as well. And I see that's our greatest need at this point. The budget's solid, but we need new funding, sustainable funding, so we can have those new hires.
Deputy Rosapal?
I cannot disagree with that. We need men. The guys feel that they are in a crisis right now with responding to the calls, getting behind on their calls, getting behind on their follow-up investigations. They need some relief.
I agree. We need to get more manpower out there with this expanding drug dilemma going on. It's like Hurricane Katrina hitting this place. It's taken out families. We're getting more burglaries, more thefts, more homicides. And I believe that's what we need to do, add more manpower.
And Detective Slaughter?
I think is the kind of the outsider face of this. I don't disagree with the manpower, but I think we first need to maximize what we have, and I think more can be done to maximize things the way things currently are. Maximize it, improve to the community that we've done. We've squeezed every ounce of lemon juice out of that lemon before we ask for the taxpayers to pony up more money.
All right. Finally, gentlemen, now is your chance to make your closing remarks, whatever you would like the viewers and the voters to know about you and why you think they should choose you for Sheriff of Cascade County. You will have 90 seconds, a minute and a half for your closing remarks. We'll start with you, Deputy Rosapal.
All right. I think this office needs strong leadership, somebody that's led, somebody who's a good supervisor, and somebody that has organizational, have managed the organization. Someone who hasn't fluffed their career in order to show that they've had leadership, whatever. They need to know the office and have experience to run it. Having leadership, they need to know their personnel that they have, be able to coach them, understand that they're going to make mistakes, and when they do make mistakes, assist them so they don't repeat them. They have to be able to make quick decisions. And when they make those quick decisions and something goes south on them, they have to take the responsibility for that. And hold himself to a higher standard to the subordinates. And I believe I'm that candidate.
Okay. Thank you again. This is 90 seconds, your chance to give us your closing remarks of why you believe voters should choose you. It's now your turn.
I've worked in this business for 28 years. I've worked in the private sector for 25, so I've kind of learned both areas of law enforcement and the private sector. I've been a transport officer, a detention officer, a diver going in and recovering victims from the river. And at this point, I started the reserves, and I would like to get the reserve program started again along with the Explorer program, so we can find out and get these kids in the school and maybe hopefully find out if we're going to have some threats or anything coming our way. We can hurry up and get somebody in there, or suicides or anything like that. So I know the program. I'm ready for the challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Kynette. Detective Slaughter.
I believe the citizens of Cascade County are ready for something new. I think they're ready for something fresh. I think they're ready for something different. I bring a new plan, a new idea, a new way of looking at things. To use the cliche, I'm definitely going to get outside the box when it comes to thinking about how to lead the sheriff's office. I bring a lot of energy, and I want to put the staff first. I want to highlight them. I want to put them in the driver's seat of this organization. I want to work with the unions to solicit their ideas about how to run the office, and then I'll make the final decision, but get their input, get their say and buy-in to the organization. I think that's really important. You know, unfortunately, throughout time of the sheriff's office, in some ways they can't see the forest through the trees anymore. And I want to help break through that and provide solid leadership and bring the organization to the next level.
Thank you, Detective Slaughter. Finally, Sheriff Edwards.
First, I'd like to thank you for hosting this forum. I believe it's extremely important for the citizens to hear us. And I'd like to thank the citizens for tuning in this evening. 8 years ago, I inherited a mess. And I stood before you and said I would clean up and take care of business. And I have done just that. The Sheriff's Office no longer has a $1.2 million deficit, and we currently have a surplus of roughly $3.5 million. We've seen I have seen the best equipment I have ever seen in my career. We have the best equipment I've ever seen in my career. Heck, the overall operations of the Sheriff's Office is better than it ever has been. I have given 30 years of my life serving my country and serving Cascade County, and I have done so proudly. I had one bad hour, period. At no point in my 8 years as the Cascade County Sheriff has our office failed. It has only flourished. I've led this office through good times and extremely trying times. And when I am reelected, I will continue to lead the Sheriff's Office in a positive direction and be the sheriff you expect me to be. I want to thank you all again for allowing this forum. I want to thank you all for your support, and I look forward to being your sheriff for the next 4 years.
And we would like to thank all of you for taking time, Detective Jesse Slaughter, Sheriff Bob Edwards, Deputy Bob Rosapal, and Mr. George Kynette. Thank you so much for taking time to give us some good answers to these questions. For the voters out there, remember the absentee ballots will be going out next week, and the primary is scheduled for June 5th, so make sure to vote because this is a big election, a very important election. Again, thanks to everyone who helped make this possible tonight. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes, and Keely Van Middendorf as well from Montana This Morning. Thank you. Good night.